Welcome to Spooky Ass Shit. I am your host, Eric Dwinells, and I have got kind of a strange one for you guys tonight because I was sitting around, I was trying to think, I've got some files on my computer and I've got some bookmarks ready to go on the internet there, but, I'm trying to get inspiration for what to do a show about, and I'm thinking, maybe a ghost story, and then for some reason the idea of green ghosts pop into my mind. And I say, maybe I should look up some green ghosts. And really, apropos of nothing, and standing for nothing. It's not like it's St. Patrick's Day or something else that we'd want like green for. But we're just going to talk about green ghosts tonight. That's it. That's the plan. And guess what? Didn't find a ton of them. It's not going to stop me. Still going to do it. We're going to talk about alleged real ghosts, and we're going to talk about some pop culture ghost. I'm sure if you think hard, you can think of at least a few famous green ghosts. Before we begin everything, I would like to point you to the show's website. That is spookyas.com or spookyasshit.com. There you can listen to just about each and every episode, including the ones possibly no longer available on your favorite streaming service. You can also find links to the social media. I am at spookyasshit on Instagram, and you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/spookyas. While you're there, you can join our secret closed group, the Spookaroos, where you can talk about green ghosts and other spooky ass shit till your heart's content without the weight of public judgment upon you. And a couple other things to point out before we move on. I just want to mention that I am doing another fundraiser. This time, I know it's the worst time in the world to be asking for money, but keep in mind that performers are affected by COVID as well, and you can't perform if you are not allowed to gather an audience, and that's what happened this year in Salem. Usually I'm a street performer in Salem all through October, even parts of September, and that couldn't really happen this year, so I'm losing out on a big chunk of change, which is very unfortunate because that's part of what I rely on to keep going in this world, and especially this year because my car lease is coming to an end and I'm going to need a down payment for either a new lease or a new car. So very bad timing, this COVID. I know that is probably the least important thing that's happening during COVID, but hey, it's affecting me. So I'm putting it out there. And I'm letting people who support spooky ass shit and who support my witch finding activities in Salem, if you are so inclined, even if it's just $1, that is totally fine. That's how we do it on the street. Go ahead, go to gofundme.com/witchfinder20 and you can donate there. Again, however much you're able to give, every little bit helps. And also, this is not something that I'm doing where I'm asking for money for nothing. Of course, I do these shows, but also I'm putting out videos on the Witchfinder YouTube account. Now, YouTube won't let you do custom URLs until you have a certain number of subscribers and you've been around for a certain amount of time, so I can't just tell you, go to youtube.com and, / whatever. You have to search for Witchfinder Salem, and then probably my channel will come up, or at least some of my videos, and you can find the channel from there. There are, I think, 8 videos right now on the channel, 3 of which dive deep into the history of the Salem witch trials, and I'll be doing more of those as we go on, and then a couple other more lighthearted ones talking to some of my fellow street performers. One of the coolest videos on there right now is the exclusive tour that I did with Professor Emerson Baker of Salem State University, going through the Peabody Essex Museum's 1692 Witchcraft Trials exhibit. It's the first time they're exhibiting all these artifacts directly related to the witchcraft trials of 1692. It's the first time they've done it in 30 years, so it was awesome to get the chance to have this whole exhibit to ourselves and to go through and talk about just some. We could have stayed and talked a lot longer if the museum would have let us, but they had a strict timeline for us. So you can go watch that video, and I highly recommend that you do. And when you do, just know that PEM has already made, nothing official, but they've made some overtures that maybe we'll revisit this exhibit in the coming months. So you might just be looking at part 1 of a 2-parter. So to help out the Witchfinder, which also because it helps me out, is helping out this program, Spooky Ass Shit, you can go to gofundme.com/witchfinder20. And thank you so much to those of you who have already donated. Your support and encouragement and donations mean the world to me. Now, this is one of those situations where, like I said, I didn't find a ton of information on green ghosts. So if you guys know some good green ghost stories, let me know. But on the internet, I didn't find much. And what I did find was still kind of sparse. For example, the first ghost I want to talk about is one that, in theory, I could have met many years ago because I performed in the building that this ghost is supposed to haunt. And that is the somewhat infamous green ghost of the Cambridge, Massachusetts, YMCA. Now, this green ghost is supposed to haunt the basement area, which used to be a locker room. I believe it was still a locker room when I was there, because I had heard about this ghost in high school, actually, the first time I heard about it, because I had a book, and I believe the book is called the National Register of Historic Haunted Places, or something like that. National Registry of Haunted Places, something like that. And, of course, I tried to go to all the ones in Massachusetts when I first got my license. I didn't quite make it to all of them, but I made it to a lot of them with some of my high school friends. How you guys doing, if you're listening? And YMCA was not one that we went to, but I performed there probably in the early 2000s, I guess. I was in a production of Nonsense Amen, playing Sister Hubert. Or Hubert? Yeah, Hubert. If you're familiar with that one, that is the role that is normally played by a large African-American lady. So, of course, it's perfect casting for me. Actually, the show was a lot of fun, but it was a terrible, terrible time. The company was not fun at all to work with. The director and the producer seemed to have a problem with the cast, although I couldn't really figure it out. Didn't seem directed at me, but still, it was not a fun working environment. But that gave us a lot of downtime in the theater, and like I said, the theater was housed inside this Cambridge YMCA. So I would try to go down to this locker room to try to find the green ghost. But of course, you can only stalk around a locker room so long before people start looking at you funny if you're not there to actually use the gym or the pool. I think that's what it was. I think it was near the pool. So, it's not like I was hanging out in the locker room for too long. Didn't want to get a reputation, But yeah, there's really not too much information on this guy except that it's a male figure and it glows green, and sometimes people will see it down in this area. They asked the YMCA Cambridge president about this, a guy by the name of Jeff Seffert, and he said, quote, "He lives in the bowels of the building in what used to be a locker room, using my facility without paying his fees." And he says that he would ask the specter to leave, but, quote, "I'm afraid a ghostly human rights group would form and we'd have to find him an apartment or something." Now, this ghost isn't really known for doing anything too terrible. He's kind of more of like an annoyance, turning on the lights and turning them off and causing issues with the plumbing that the maintenance crew has to take care of. And he likes to just appear out of nowhere and kind of scare people, but he doesn't really do anything terrifying, or he's not violent or anything like that. You can just find stories online that say like, yeah, people see this, but there's no like, on the 12th of December, this man, Johnny Joe John went down to the basement, and like, there's no like narrative versions of the stories. It's just like, yeah, people report seeing him, green guy. That's about it. So like I said, I didn't see anything while I was there, although YMCA can be a little bit scarier in other ways because, of course, they're out there trying to do good work and help people who need help, which is commendable. But sometimes those people are scary when you run into them late at night after a rehearsal on your way out. So that's my story about the Cambridge YMCA Green Ghost. Don't worry, I started with that one for a reason, because that's kind of the lamest story that I have for you tonight. They get better. Okay, so now we're going to move to Burlington, Connecticut. And this is a good green ghost story because this is the Green Lady. Down a dark country lane by the name of Upson Road lies a small burial ground, which is officially known as Seventh-day Baptist Cemetery. The locals, however, generally refer to it as the Green Lady Cemetery. They say at night, should you choose to visit this old burial ground, you might just encounter a green, glowing, ghostly woman, and you must beware. For if she catches you in her cemetery at night, she just may smile at you. Yep, that's all she's known to do. No violence or grim remonstrance, just a smile. I told you they get better. I didn't say they get, great. Many believe the Lady of the Green Mist to be the ghost of a young woman named Elizabeth Palmiter. According to local legend, on April 11th or 12th, 1800, Elizabeth's husband, Benjamin, went to town to get some supplies. He suddenly found himself in the middle of a very bad snowstorm. Benjamin decided to find a place to stay in town and wait for the weather to subside. When he didn't return right away, Elizabeth feared for his well-being and bravely went out to search for him. After getting lost in the fury of the storm, she became confused and accidentally stumbled into a nearby swamp. With the snow causing near whiteout conditions and the extreme cold dulling her capabilities, Elizabeth was unable to find her way out of the swamp, and so she either froze to death or drowned. Benjamin Palmiter finally returned home to find his wife missing. He frantically searched the wilderness surrounding his home for her, and after some time, he discovered her frozen body in the swamp. At least, that's how it could have happened. But how about this? Other versions of the story say that Benjamin murdered Elizabeth himself and threw her body into the swamp. The legend varies from teller to teller, as so many small local legends do, but they all agree on one fact. When she died, Elizabeth was wearing her favorite green dress. And I guess that's where the green glow is supposed to come from, is from this dress. However, if you die in a swamp, you might have kind of a swampy greenish glow to you, maybe. Again, we're not clear on the rules for ghosts. We've been through this before. Go back and listen to our episode, me and Brian Tony, Ghosts, what the fuck are they? And, there's a lot of debate as to how ghosts work and what they can and can't do and why they become certain ways. And why would they haunt a cemetery? I've brought that up several times on the show before. I don't understand why a ghost would haunt a cemetery. Many people walking near the cemetery at night have claimed to have seen a female apparition surrounded in a green mist. According to most accounts, she merely appears without any kind of provocation or any kind of pattern. She just smiles and then dissipates out of view. Some people have claimed to see mysterious lights, like a lantern being carried by unseen hands. Some people believe that this is not Elizabeth, but actually the ghost of her husband, Benjamin Palmiter, perpetually searching for Elizabeth in the swamp. Of course, he didn't die searching for her, but if this is one of those kind of like timestamp, memory reliving tragic events kind of thing, then I guess it could make sense in that way. In case you're new to the program, I don't actually believe in ghosts. I just like talking about them. So whatever kind of bullshit you want to come up with to rationalize why the stories never make sense or connect together, hardly ever. And also, there, in some of the reports that I read, there's like the side story about satanic rituals being performed in the woods directly across the street from the cemetery. This came out in the early 90s, but this was right in the satanic panic, the mid to late 80s. Well, I guess really starting in the 70s, if you go back and listen to our episode about backmasking. In the 70s, starting in the 70s, you had the satanic panic. It lasted up through the 90s, satanic ritual abuse. And, I don't think it's really worth going into. There's really no proof of it. There's really no proof for any of the story. Like, if you check historical records, apparently, they don't know really who Elizabeth was or how she died. They know that she died. They know she had this husband, Benjamin, and really it's the information that was on her headstone, and that's all that people know. about her. The rest of the story about her drowning like in the swamp, freezing to death, excuse me, that's all just stuff that came along the way. That's all local legend. Today, there are no full standing headstones in the cemetery, and this is due to weathering, yes, but also vandalism. There were 2 big incidents of vandalism that took place. One in the 1970s, which took out most of the headstones, except for Elizabeth Palmiter's. That's the only one that was left standing in full. But that got vandalized in 2010. What happened in 2010? Well, that was the time that someone, probably more than one person, went into the cemetery and stole the 200-pound headstone of Elizabeth Palmiter, the only headstone that was still standing in the cemetery. And the thing about this is that it's not even the original headstone, because the original headstone had been vandalized in the 1970s, and so it was replaced with this new concrete surrounded kind of deal in the 70s, and that one had stood until 2010, and now that one has disappeared too. So now there are no headstones standing. Town historian Len Alderman said that he considered the legend of the Green Lady to be nothing more than a story made up by youths who attended a nearby camp many years ago. And honestly, a rather unimpressive story at that. I mean, she floats by and smiles at you. That's it. Like, if you were sitting around a campfire, wouldn't you come up with something better than that? This story kind of, honestly, it kind of reminds me of the story of Lucy Keys, which I did an episode about. You might remember that. That's one of our ghost stories here in Massachusetts at Wachusett Mountain. And at least in that story, you've got like a family, and you can hear the mother crying, and she cries for her daughter at night. And I'm not saying it's the most exciting story, but at least there's like something to it. She doesn't just come out and smile at you. She doesn't glow green though. I do like that. I do like a green ghost. That's why I decided to do this whole episode about it. And if you get to choose, I don't know if my cat just said hi. I don't know if you heard that. If you do get to choose, A, to become a ghost, and B, like you get to choose a color to be as a ghost, look for me to be a green ghost. My favorite color. And this historian, Len Alderman, he's also dubious to the idea that Elizabeth Palmiter could be the Green Lady anyway. He claims that the original versions of the story say that the Green Lady drowned in the mid-1800s, which would be at least 50 years after the death of Mrs. Palmiter. Other sources claim that sightings of the Green Lady date all the way back to 1710, which is almost 100 years before Mrs. Palmiter shuffled off this mortal coil. It is most likely that Elizabeth Palmiter was dubbed the Green Lady due to one simple fact. When the legend was created, hers was the only headstone still standing in the cemetery. Now, I know a lot of you like to visit these kinds of places, spooky places, and take pictures and stuff like that, but just know this before you go. The cemetery is now private property. It's owned by the New Britain Public Works, and the Burlington Police and local residents are known to patrol the area at night to guard against any further vandalization. Of course, I don't know what you'd be vandalizing since there's nothing there, but visiting the site during the day for the purpose of historical research is permitted, but really all you're going to see there now is some rough stone walls encasing a whole lot of nothing. So, and, you know, maybe you'll spot a ghost if you believe in that kind of thing. A nice green lady ghost who might smile at you. And believe it or not, those are really the only stories of substance that I was able to find doing a search on the internet for green ghost. Not a ton of stuff comes up. I'm sure there's got to be more ghosts that are described as green. But I don't know, man. I tried Google and Bing. And I tried the different ways of searching, and I didn't find much. But I do want to talk about some fictional green ghosts. Those happen quite a bit. It seems like I remember a lot growing up that, like, when a ghost was on, you know, a cartoon or something like that, there would be kind of a greenish glow, sometimes blue, sometimes white. But yeah, kind of greenish. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that, you know, toys that glow in the dark tend to be kind of a whitish, greenish hue. And like I'm thinking of like the Playmobil ghost. My cat has a lot to say tonight. I don't know if you guys are hearing her, but that's Emma Jean if you do hear her. Yeah, the kind of a greenish, whitish hue. And I think maybe just, like glowing, you think of glowing things, you think of green. So maybe that's why in art, a lot of times they are depicted with some green. So when I think of green ghosts, my mind goes to Scooby-Doo. I believe, I'm not a Scooby-Doo expert, so listen, don't hate me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe in the original series, Scooby-Doo, Where Are You?, that is where the green ghost appear for the first time, although apparently, looking on the Wikipedia, they have appeared in various incarnations of the show. The thing with Scooby-Doo is that it was, like always, some corrupt landowner or something, right? And that's the case with these guys, too. There are bad guys known as the Green Ghost. There's 2 of them. They look really cool, actually. They look like hooded figures, like green hooded figures with faces that you can't see, but you can see their bright, evil red eyes, and they've got chains coming off of their arms. They're really cool looking, but they're just like crooked lawyers. That's all. So nothing too exciting. Another pop culture green ghost that I want to talk about is one that I only discovered recently, although it's been around, I believe, since 1965, and that is the board game, The Green Ghost. I saw this at a thrift shop, and, antique store, thrift shop, and I totally would have bought it, except A, it was a little bit pricey at like $60 or something like that, and the box is huge, like no joke. The box is like 3 feet long and like probably more than half a foot wide or tall or whatever, and I wouldn't have room to store that anywhere. So I didn't get it, but I did look it up online to see what this game was, and to be honest with you, it doesn't sound all that fun anyway. You're actually trying to help the green ghost find its ghost children, and I don't know. It does look pretty cool, though. It's very impressive size-wise, and there's a little ghost that goes around and picks up its children, so that's kind of cool. So that's the Green Ghost board game. But now let's talk about some more famous green ghosts, and I probably should end with this one, since it's the one I'm sure that we all know. This is probably the main event of Green Ghost, but for me personally, he's not my main event. So let's talk about Slimer. Slimer from Ghostbusters. He appeared in Ghostbusters 1 and 2, and of course he was one of the main characters in The Real Ghostbusters and Slimer in The Real Ghostbusters. And of course he had his own ecto cooler, High C. So that was pretty dope. Listen, Slimer was really cool. I was into Slimer. I had the toys when I was a kid. I'll explain why he's not my main event Green Ghost as we go on, but just know it's not for a lack of love of Slimer. It's just I love this other ghost that we're going to talk about last so much, and I consider it more of like a personal ghost. But let's talk about Slimer. Slimer was originally voiced by Ivan Reitman and Adam Ray in the films, and Frank Welker in the animated series. That's your Scooby-Doo connection, because Frank Welker, actually he's the voice of Scooby-Doo now, I believe, but and also Fred, because he's the original voice of Golden Boy Fred. He's like a mascot and like friend to the Ghostbusters in the animated series, although in the movies he's not portrayed that way. He's just another ghost that needs to be busted. During the pre-production of Ghostbusters, the director, Ivan Reitman, said that Slimer was sort of like Bluto from the film Animal House. And Bluto, of course, was played by John Belushi, who is a friend of many of the people in Ghostbusters, including Dan Aykroyd, of course, the Blues Brothers. But since then, Slimer has been described as the ghost of John Belushi by Dan Aykroyd in many interviews. So a lot of people kind of mistakenly say that, Slimer is supposed to be the ghost of John Belushi. John Belushi was actually supposed to be in Ghostbusters, but of course he passed away, and so his role went to Bill Murray. In the Ghostbusters script, Slimer is never actually called by that name, so he's never actually given one. In fact, the creature's original moniker was simply Onion Head Ghost, which is what the film crew semi-officially called him because of the horrible odor which he uses to scare people in a scene cut from the original movie. So he's supposed to be kind of like foul smelling. And he he wasn't like a main character. In the first movie, he just comes, he slimes Peter, and that's kind of it. And then I guess he wasn't supposed to be in the second movie at all, but they put him in the cartoon and he became a popular character in the cartoons. So the producers of the cartoons pressured the makers of Ghostbusters 2 to include Slimer in a featured role, and they had him scripted to be even bigger than he was. They hired an actor to be in a suit to portray a Slimer, and then he was cut from the movie, and then he was put back into it. They spent like so much money on this thing, and they couldn't get the original actor back, so then he's played by this woman named Robin, and it's a whole thing. So yeah, Slimer in Ghostbusters 2 was supposed to have like a big subplot where he roams around the Ghostbusters hangout, the fire station, and he befriends Louis Tully, which you see a little bit of in the final movie, but they actually cut a lot out. So because the test audiences said that Slimer's scenes were intrusive, probably because they weren't originally supposed to be in the movie anyway. So you would have seen a lot more of Slimer, but the audience said, no, it's a little intrusive. Now, he was originally known as the Green Ghost in the initial merchandise for the real Ghostbusters, but when the cartoon series was produced and in response to the name given to the character by audiences, the writers renamed the Green Ghost Slimer, and the name stuck on all subsequent Ghostbusters properties, including Ghostbusters 2 and the Ghostbusters Ladies' Night movie, and I think in the new movie coming out too. Although the character was never actually referred to as Slimer in any of the films. Now, his origins in the original timeline were explained in a Marvel UK comic book called The Real Ghostbusters, issue number 22. And it is explained that Slimer was actually, when he was in his, corruptible mortal form, he was known as King Reamless. Slimer, spelled backwards. And the story states that he was basically like this obese king who died of heart failure. And Slimer, like I said, he does appear in the 2016 Lady Ghostbusters movie, but he was actually supposed to be in it even more. And let me tell you this idea, it sounds terrible. In this film, when he was alive, Slimer was going to be a gangster who killed a restaurant waiter that got his order wrong, resulting in his imprisonment and execution. After his death, the Ghostbusters were going to encounter him haunting the same restaurant, but due to the experimental nature of their equipment, they inadvertently disfigure him, destroying his legs and turning him green before he escapes out into the world. Now that sounds terrible. Slimer, I guess in the first movies you don't get to know Slimer, but maybe just because I grew up watching him in the cartoon, like he's not a killer gangster, That was a bad idea. But then again, 2016 Ghostbusters, a lot of people have an awful lot of feelings about that. That's a rabbit hole I have gone into probably more than once. Just the reaction to the 2016 Ghostbuster movie. I find it very, very interesting. Maybe I'll do an episode about that someday if it doesn't seem like way too late to be talking about Ghostbusters 2016, and it probably does, but it's still very interesting to me. All right, let's move on to what I'm calling my main event, Green Ghost. Have any of you guessed what it is? Something that an 80s kid grew up watching? Something that I had on tape, taped off TV, of course, taped off the Disney Channel, if that gives you any idea? Of course, I'm talking about my personal favorite Green Ghost, Mr. Boogedy. Let me tell you the story. In the 17th century, a small group of pilgrims lived in a settlement known as Lucifer Falls. They were a hard-working, decent group of people. Once in a while, of course, they would enjoy a good laugh. Most of them, that is. William Hanover was not like his neighbors. He was ill-tempered, and he had no time for fun or frivolity of any sort. Even little children had to watch their step around him. The children called him Mr. Boogedy because he delighted in scaring them. Although he was wealthy and single, the women of Lucifer Falls were hardly lining up outside Hanover's door. Well, can you blame them? This was a man whose only delight in life was jumping out to scare little children. Hardly Father of the Year material. Still, there was one woman in town who felt some pity for the friendless Hanover. The beautiful widow Marion, who lived with her sweet little boy, Jonathan. Misinterpreting her neighborly kindness as a sign of her yearning for him, Hanover became obsessed with widow Marion. Though he was significantly older than the young widow, he decided to propose to her. To Hanover's great shock, she turned him down. But that was not the end of it. Not hardly. Hanover was willing to do anything, and I do mean anything, to win the hand of widow Marion. After all, he was a man of great power and authority, used to having his own way. Some people say he sold his soul to the devil that very night. In exchange, the devil gave Hanover a magic cloak, a cloak so powerful it would make him invincible. A cloak so powerful, he hoped, it would even give him the widow Marion. More than anything else in this world, he wanted Marion. So, one day when Marion's poor little boy Jonathan had a terrible cold and was on his way to the doctor, who should jump out of the woods in his brand new magic cloak? Hanover! And he took young Jonathan back to his house, and he threatened Marion that if she didn't marry him that very night, she would never, ever see poor little Jonathan again. And just to make sure that she went along with all this, Mr. Boogedy decided to cast his very first spell using his new magical cloak. But as he performed his dark ritual, something went terribly wrong. For you see, as Marion approached the house, just as Hanover was performing the ritual, the house blew up. Well, Hanover must have missed something in the fine print in his contract with the devil. Just like magic, the whole house disappeared. And now every house that has been built upon that property since has been haunted. They, Hanover, Marion, and Jonathan, all became ghosts, and their spirits are locked in an eternal stalemate. For if Mr. Boogedy leaves the house, the devil will drag his soul to hell. And the devil's magic keeps Marion's spirit from entering the house. For the past 300 years, Mr. Boogedy and Jonathan have haunted the house, while widow Marion wanders the grounds outside weeping for her lost child. So that is the backstory of Mr. Boogedy. What they don't mention in the story, because of course if you were watching the special you'd see it with your eyes, is that the cloak that the devil gives him is green, and this turns him into a kind of a green glowing phantasm when he becomes the evil spirit that haunts the house. And of course the family that moves in has to do battle with Mr. Boogedy and hopefully reunite the widow Marion and her long-lost son, Jonathan. Now, if you have not seen this movie, it is available on Disney+, and it's also, I think you can find it in other places online. It's not hard to find, and you should definitely look it up. It's well worth a watch. It's definitely of its time. I think it's a good thing to watch with children. It's not too scary, but it still gives a lot of atmosphere, especially in the build-up when you don't know for sure that the place is haunted and all that kind of stuff. And lots of nice little cameos in it, little celebrities. All the children would go on to have careers, kinda. The youngest one was on Alf for many years, and I used to watch Alf, so I recognized him. The middle son is played by the same actor who would go on to play Bud Bundy. And of course, the oldest child is the sister in the group, played by Buffy the Vampire Slayer herself, the original Christy Swanson. So that's fun. And then, of course, the town historian is played by John Astin, a.k.a. Gomez Addams, a.k.a. the Riddler. Done a ton of stuff. But yeah, Gomez Addams, that's where it's at. He's the original TV Gomez Addams. Now, like I said, I grew up watching this over and over again on VHS. I probably watched it when it first premiered in 1986 on ABC. And just something I love, takes me right back to my childhood. I remember watching this over and over again. So I know some of you are going to feel exactly the same way as I do, and some of you are going to hear this and be like, who the hell cares about Mr. Boogedy? Why is he talking about some old special from almost 40 years ago? Well, listen, hey, we all got our things. We all got our sweet spots that make us nostalgia, and Mr. Boogedy hits me right in the sweet spot. And I just recommend that you check it out. But I do want to talk about a couple things. So, first of all, I always thought that the dad was really annoying, and that has not changed. He is really annoying. I don't know why the family would put up with him, although the boys seem to enjoy it. His gag city and all his little practical jokes and kidding, it gets on my nerves still. When I was a kid, it did, and as an adult, it's even worse. But what I really want to talk about is the scene that I basically just went through for you, the description that I just gave of Mr. Boogedy's backstory when he was William Hanover. That is taken almost word for word from the scene where John Astin's character, the town historian, is explaining the origins of Mr. Boogedy to the children. And I love that scene because they go to the Historical Society or wherever it is, and he opens a pop-up book which explains this whole story, which is a weird pop-up book to have in the first place, like the story of Mr. Boogedy, okay? But then this section was always, it spoke to me. It spoke to me on a deep level because, especially the scene with the devil. The devil is not scary looking per se, but his face is scary. When he puts the cloak on Mr. Boogedy, chances are that most of you are watching Mr. Boogedy put on the cloak and smile and like feel his power and all that kind of stuff. But look close over his shoulder and watch the devil's face. The devil starts doing like all these faces back there, and towards the end he starts to stick out his tongue. And as a kid, I found that really freaky looking. As an adult, it's kind of camp, like whatever. But as a kid, it was really freaky looking. So that was something that always got me. But also, the fact, now, this is supposed to be a local legend too, just like the Green Lady. So the story doesn't have to make a ton of sense, and, the villagers are telling it to each other, okay. But in this pop-up book, he goes to visit the devil. Like, he doesn't, like, summon the devil to himself, like, at his house or something, like you kind of normally hear about. He goes to the woods to the devil. Now, okay, going out to the woods to meet the devil, that's something you hear about. That's something they talked about in Salem. So, okay, so maybe that's a thing. But this devil has his own, like, boutique shop in the woods, and it's called Hot Clothes. There's a sign on top of the building, and the devil's boutique is called Hot Clothes. And there's a sign outside, just in case you didn't know who's running things, tied to a noose, and it says, "Ye Old Devil." That's beautiful. That's a beautiful scene right there. Now, I put a little more into the story than they actually did in the movie, trying to explain why things are a certain way. And that's, it fits in the canon, but they don't actually explain everything exactly the way I just laid it out. So I was kind of adding some details. Again, just like a local legend, adding my own little details to it about why Marion can't enter the house. She just says the magic keeps me out. She doesn't explain what magic. So I'm assuming it's the devil's magic, because otherwise nobody's really making out in this deal. Hanover got the cloak, but it didn't get him Marion, and even though it's supposed to make him invincible, it didn't really do much for him. Like, he blew up his own house. That was it. And then, like, he's still a ghost, so the devil doesn't have his soul. So why would that be? So that's why I said, like, well, maybe if he leaves the house, the devil takes his soul and Marion can't enter, because then the devil wouldn't get what he wants, because, anyway. So that's the story of Mr. Boogedy. I'm not saying that this is the only time we're going to talk about Mr. Boogedy. Maybe I'll do a watch and review at some point. But definitely, if I'm doing an episode about green ghosts, I wanted to cover Mr. Boogedy. So that is it. That is my green ghost episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of wackadoodle episode, but I think it came out pretty good. I encourage you to share the show, subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or wherever you happen to listen from. And of course, if you could, leave some kindly worded reviews, leave words of encouragement. It really helps motivate me and lets me know that people are listening and enjoying all the work that I put into the show. And of course, I invite you once again, check out the show's website, spookyas.com. And if you're so inclined, and if you are able to, go ahead and make a donation at gofundme.com/witchfinder20. Every single little bit helps, even if you only have $1 to give. I will be thankful for it. And you'll get your name in the credits of my videos. So that's something else to look forward to. All right, maybe next time we'll talk about blue ghosts. Who knows? Until then, don't be afraid.